صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Sahih Bukhari, the book of Al-Faraaid, the laws of inheritance. Footnote: Al-Faraaid means the shares which are fixed for the closest relatives of the deceased. Such shares are prescribed in the Qur'an, and it is half, 1/4, 1/8, 2/3, 1/3, and 1/6. See the Qur'an, Surah 4, verses 11, 12, and 176. Chapter on the statement of Allah. Allah commands you as regards your children's inheritance, up to, this is a commandment from Allah, and Allah is ever all-knowing, most forbearing. Qur'an, chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, may Allah be pleased with him, I became sick. So Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, and Abu Bakr came on foot to pay me a visit. When they came, I was unconscious. Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, performed ablution, and he poured over me the water of his ablution, and I came to my senses and said, O Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, what shall I do regarding my property? How shall I distribute it? The Prophet, peace be upon him, did not reply till the divine verses of inheritance, Al-Faraaid, were revealed. Chapter on learning about the laws of inheritance, descent, and distribution. Uqba bin Amir said, learn the laws of inheritance before those who depend on az-zann, guessing, namely those who base their judgment on mere presumption. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, beware of suspicion, for it is the worst of false tales, and don't look for the other's faults, and don't spy, and don't hate each other, and don't desert, cut your relations with one another. O Allah's slaves, be brothers. See Hadith number 6064. Chapter on the statement of the Prophet, peace be upon him, our, that is, Messenger's property is not to be inherited, and whatever we leave after our death is sadaqah, to be spent in charity. Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, Fatima and Al-Abbas, peace be upon them, came to Abu Bakr, seeking their share from the property of Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, and at that time they were asking for their land at Fadak and their share from Khaybar. Continued to number 6726. Abu Bakr said to them, I have heard from Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, saying, our property is not to be inherited, and whatever we after our death leave is to be spent in charity, but the family of Muhammad, peace be upon him, may take their provisions from this property. Abu Bakr added, by Allah, I will not leave the procedure I saw Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, following during his lifetime concerning this property. Therefore, Fatima left Abu Bakr and did not speak to him till she died. Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, our Messenger's property is not to be inherited, and whatever we leave is sadaqah, to be spent in charity in Allah's cause. Narrated Malik bin As, I went and entered upon Umar. His doorman, Yarfa, came saying, Uthman, Abdurrahman, Az-Zubair, and Sa'ad are asking your permission to see you. May I admit them? Omar said, yes. So he admitted them. Then he came again and said, may I admit Ali and Abbas? He said, yes. Abbas said, O chief of the believers, judge between me and this man, Ali. Omar said, I beseech you by Allah, by whose permission both the heaven and the earth exist. Do you know that Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, our, the Messenger's property is not to be inherited, and whatever we leave after our death is sadaqah, to be spent in charity? And by that, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, meant himself. The group said, no doubt, he said so. Omar then faced Ali and Abbas and said, do you both know that Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said that? They replied, no doubt, he said so. Omar said, so let me talk to you about this matter. Allah favored his Messenger, peace be upon him, with something of his fa'i, that is, booty won by the Muslims at war without fighting, which he did not give to anybody else. Allah said, and what Allah gave as fa'i, booty, to his Messenger, up to do all thing. Qur'an, chapter 59, verse 6. And so that property was only for Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him. Yet, by Allah, he neither gathered that property for himself nor withheld it from you, but he gave its income to you and distributed it among you till there remained the present property. out of which the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to spend the yearly maintenance for his family, and whatever used to remain he used to spend it where Allah's property is spent, that is, in charity, etc. Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, followed that system throughout his life. Now I beseech you by Allah, do you know all that? They said yes. Omar then said to Ali and Abbas, I beseech you by Allah, do you know that? Both of them said yes. Omar added, and when the Prophet, peace be upon him, died, Abu Bakr said, I am the successor of Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, and took charge of that property and managed it in the same way as Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, did. Then I took charge of this property for 2 years, during which I managed it as Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, and Abu Bakr did. Then you both, Ali and Abbas, came to talk to me, bearing the same claim and presenting the same case. O Abbas, you came to me asking for your share from the property of your nephew, and this man, Ali, came to me asking for the share of his wife from the property of her father. I said, if you both wish, I will give that to you on that condition, that is, that you would follow the way of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Abu Bakr, and as I, Umar, have done in managing it. Now both of you seek of me a verdict other than that? Lo, by Allah, by whose permission both the heaven and the earth exist, I will not give any verdict other than that till the hour is established. If you are unable to manage it, then return it to me, and I will be sufficient to manage it on your behalf. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, not even a single dinar of my property should be distributed after my death to my inheritors, but whatever I leave, excluding the provision for my wives and my servants, is sadaqah, to be spent in charity. Narrated Urwa, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, said, when Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, died, his wives intended to send Uthman to Abu Bakr asking him for their share of the inheritance. Then Aisha said to them, didn't Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, say, our Messenger's property is not to be inherited, and whatever we leave is sadaqah, to be spent in charity. Chapter on the statement of the Prophet, peace be upon him, whoever leaves some property after his death, then it is for his family, inheritors. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, I am more closer to the believers than their own selves, so whoever of them dies while being in debt and leaves nothing for its repayment, then we are to pay his debts on his behalf. And whoever among the believers dies leaving some property, then that property is for his heirs. Chapter on the inheritance share of the offspring from the property of their dead fathers and mothers. And Zayd bin Thabit said, if a man or a woman leaves as an heir a single daughter, then she inherits half of the property, and if there are 2 daughters or more, they inherit 2/3 of the property, and if there is a son along with these daughters, then the other heirs, if there are any, are given their shares first, and what remains is to be distributed among the daughters and the son, with the ratio of 2 shares for the male heir and 1 share each for the female heirs. Narrated Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, give the Faraaid, the shares of the inheritance that are prescribed in the Qur'an, to those who are entitled to receive it. Then whatever remains should be given to the closest male relative of the deceased. Footnote: Al-Faraaid means the shares which are fixed for the closest relatives of the deceased. Such shares are prescribed in the Qur'an, and it is half, 1/4, 1/8, 2/3, 1/3, and 1/6. See the Qur'an, Surah 4, verses 11, 12, and 176. Chapter on the inheritance of daughters, that is, their right to inherit property. Narrated Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, I was stricken by an ailment that led me to the verge of death. The Prophet, peace be upon him, came to pay me a visit. I said, O Allah's Messenger, I have much property and no heir except my only daughter. Shall I give 2/3 of my property in charity? He said, no. I said, half of it? He said, no. I said, 1/3 of it? He said, you may do so, though 1/3 is also too much, for it is better for you to leave your offspring wealthy than to leave them poor, asking others for help. And whatever you spend for Allah's sake, you will be rewarded for it, even for a morsel of food which you may put in the mouth of your wife. I said, O Allah's Messenger, will I remain behind and fail to complete my emigration? The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, if you are left behind after me, Whatever good deeds you will do for Allah's sake will upgrade you and raise you high. Maybe you will have a long life, so that some people may benefit by you, and others, the enemies, be harmed by you. But Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, felt sorry for Sa'd bin Khawla as he died in Mecca. Sufyan, a sub-narrator, said that Sa'd bin Khawla was a man from the tribe of Bani Amr bin Lu'ay. Footnote regarding maybe you will have long life so that some people may benefit by you and others, the enemies, be harmed by you. Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas survived 40 years after the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, but Sa'd bin Khawla died in Mecca. Narrated Al-Aswad bin Yazid, Mu'adh bin Jabal came to us in Yemen as a tutor and a ruler, and we, the people of Yemen, asked him about the distribution of the property of a man who had died leaving a daughter and a sister. Mu'adh gave the daughter half of the property and gave the sister the other half. Chapter on the inheritance of one's grandchild if one has no child. And Zaid said, grandchildren are to be considered as one's own children in the distribution of inheritance in case none of one's own children are alive. A grandson as a son and granddaughter as a daughter, and they, grandsons and granddaughters, inherit their grandparents' property as their own parents would were they alive, and they prevent the sharing of the inheritance with all those relatives who would have been prevented from the same were their parents alive. So one's grandchild does not share the inheritance with one's own son if the son is alive. Narrated Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, give the Faraaid, shares prescribed in the Qur'an, to those who are entitled to receive it, and whatever remains should be given to the closest male relative of the deceased. Chapter on the share of inheritance of one's son's daughter in the presence of own daughter. Narrated Huzail bin Sharabil, Abu Musa was asked regarding the inheritance of a daughter, a son's daughter, and a sister. He said, the daughter will take half and the sister will take the half. If you go to Ibn Masud, he will tell you the same. Ibn Masud was asked and was told of Abu Musa's verdict. Ibn Masud then said, if I give the same verdict, I would stray and would not be of the rightly guided. The verdict I will give in his case will be the same as the Prophet, peace be upon him, did. That is, 1/2 is for the daughter and 1/6 for the son's daughter. That is, both shares make 2/3 of the total property, and the rest is for the sister. Afterwards, we came to Abu Musa and informed him of Ibn Masud's verdict, whereupon he said, so do not ask me for verdicts as long as this learned man is among you. Chapter on the shares of inheritance for the living paternal grandfather, the father and brothers of the deceased. Abu Bakr, Ibn Abbas, and Ibn Az-Zubair said, a grandfather is to be treated as a father in the distribution of inheritance, and Ibn Abbas recited the holy verse, O children of Adam, Qur'an, chapter 7, verse 26, and in fact by that Allah meant sons and grandsons and great-grandsons. He also recited the verse, and I have followed the religion of my fathers, Ibrahim, Abraham, Ishaq, Isaac, and Yaqub, Jacob, peace be upon them. Qur'an, chapter 12, verse 38. And it is not reported that anybody disagreed with Abu Bakr in his lifetime, although at that time there was a great number of companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And Ibn Abbas said, my son's son inherits my property, though my own brothers don't, and I do not inherit the property of my son's son. And there are different views given by Omar, Ali, Ibn Masud, and Zaid, may Allah be pleased with them, as regards inheritance. Narrated Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, give the Faraaid, the shares prescribed in the Qur'an, to those who are entitled to receive it, and then whatever remains should be given to the closest male relative of the deceased. Narrated Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, the person about whom Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, if I were to take a Khalil from this nation, my followers, then I would have taken him, that is Abu Bakr, but the Islamic Brotherhood is better, or said good, and regarded a grandfather as the father himself in distribution of inheritance. Footnote: Khalil, the one whose love is mixed with one's heart, and it is superior to a friend or beloved. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had only one Khalil, that is Allah, but he had many friends. Chapter on the inheritance of the husband along with the offspring and other relatives of the deceased. Narrated Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, during the early days of Islam, the inheritance used to be given to one's offspring and legacy used to be bequeathed to the parents. Then Allah cancelled what He wished from that order and decreed that the male should be given the equivalent of the portion of 2 females, and for the parents 1/6 for each of them, and for one's wife 1/8 if the deceased has children, and 1/4 if he has no children, for one's husband half if the deceased has no children, and 1/4 if she has children. Chapter on the inheritance of a woman and a husband along with the offspring and other relatives. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, gave the judgment that a male or female slave should be given in qisas for an abortion case of a woman from the tribe of Bani Layyan as blood money for the fetus, but the lady on whom the penalty had been imposed died. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, ordered that her property be inherited by her offspring and her husband, and that the penalty be paid by her asaba. Footnote 1. Qisas, laws of equality and punishment for wounds, etc. in retaliation. Footnote 2. Asaba means all male relatives of the deceased from the father's side. Chapter on the sisters of the deceased share the inheritance with the daughters of the deceased, the sisters being treated as the asaba. Footnote. Asaba means all male relatives of the deceased from the father's side. Narrated Al-Aswad, Mu'adh bin Jabal gave this verdict for us in the lifetime of Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him. Half of the inheritance is to be given to the daughter, and the other half to the sister. Suleiman said, Mu'adh gave a verdict for us, but he did not mention that it was so in the lifetime of Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him. Narrated Huzail, Abdullah said, the judgment I will give in this matter will be like the judgment of the Prophet, peace be upon him. That is, half is for the daughter and the rest of the inheritance for the sister. Chapter on the inheritance of the sisters and brothers. Narrated Jabir, may Allah be pleased with him, while I was sick, the Prophet, peace be upon him, entered upon me and asked for some water to perform ablution. And after he had finished his ablution, he sprinkled some water of his ablution over me, whereupon I became conscious and said, O Allah's Messenger, I have sisters. Then the divine verses regarding the laws of inheritance were revealed. Chapter on the statement of Allah. They ask you for a legal verdict. Say, Allah directs thus about al-Khalala, those who leave neither descendants nor ascendants as heirs. If it is a man that dies, leaving a sister but no child, she shall have half the inheritance. If such a deceased was a woman who left no child, her brother takes her inheritance. If there are 2 sisters, they shall have 2/3 of the inheritance. If there are brothers and sisters, then the male will have twice the share of the female. Thus does Allah makes clear to you His law, lest you go astray. And Allah is the all-knower of everything. Qur'an, chapter 4, verse 176. Narrated Al-Bara'ah, may Allah be pleased with him, the last Quranic verse that was revealed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, was the last verse of Surah An-Nisa. They ask you for a legal verdict. Say, Allah directs thus about al-Khalala, those who leave neither descendants nor ascendants as heirs. Qur'an, chapter 4, verse 176. Chapter on regarding the heirs of a lady who dies leaving 2 cousins, one of whom is her maternal brother and the other her husband. Footnote. The relationship between the lady and the 2 cousins resulted from the following situation. A man married a woman and she gave birth to a son, and then he married another woman who also gave birth to a son. Then he divorced the second wife, who consequently married her first husband's brother and gave birth to a girl. This girl married the first son of her father's brother who was her cousin. Then she died, leaving the 2 cousins as her only heirs. One of those cousins was her husband, and the other was her maternal brother. Ali said, her husband takes half of her left property, and the maternal brother 1/6, and the rest of the property is divided equally between them. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, I am closer to the believers than their own selves. So whoever among them dies leaving some inheritance, his inheritance will be given to his asaba. And whoever dies leaving a debt or dependents or destitute children, then I am their supporter. Footnote. Asaba means all male relatives of the deceased from the father's side. Narrated Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, give the Faraaid, the shares of the inheritance that are prescribed in the Qur'an, to those who are entitled to receive it, and whatever is left should be given to the closest male relative of the deceased. Chapter on Can kindred by blood, that is, Dhawil Arham, be the heir of the deceased? Narrated Ibn Abbas regarding the holy verse, and to everyone we have appointed heirs. Qur'an, chapter 4, verse 33. And also, to those also with whom you have made a pledge, brotherhood, give them their due portion by wasiyah, wills. Qur'an, chapter 4, verse 33. When the emigrants came to Al-Madinah, the Ansar used to be the heir of the emigrants and vice versa instead of their own kindred by blood, Dhawil Arham. And that was because of the bond of brotherhood which the Prophet, peace be upon him, had established between them. That is, the Ansar and the emigrants. But when the divine verse, and to everyone we have appointed heirs, Qur'an, chapter 4, verse 33 was revealed, it cancelled the other order, that is, to those also with whom you have made a pledge, brotherhood, give them their due portion by wasiyah, wills. Qur'an, chapter 4, verse 33. See volume 3, hadith number 2292. Chapter on the inheritance in the case of mula'ana. Footnote. Mula'ana or li'an means the taking of oaths by a wife and her husband, the wife denying the charge of adultery which the husband confirms by his own oath. See Qur'an chapter 24 verses 7 to 10. This chapter deals with the inheritance of the child who is born after such a situation, that is, whose heir he would be and who would be his heir. Narrated Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, a man and his wife had a case of li'an or mula'ana during the lifetime of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the man denied the paternity of her child. The Prophet, peace be upon him, gave his verdict for their separation, divorce, and then the child was regarded as belonging to the wife only. Footnote 2. Such a mother would inherit the share prescribed for her in the Qur'an from her child's inheritance, and he would be her heir if she died before him. Chapter on the child is for the owner of the bed whether its mother was a free lady or a slave girl. Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her. Utbah bin Abi Waqqas said to his brother Sa'd, the son of the slave girl of Zam'a is my son, so be his guardian. So when it was the year of the conquest of Mecca, Sa'd took that child and said, he's my nephew and my brother told me to be his guardian. On that, Abd bin Zam'a got up and said, but the child is my brother and the son of my father's slave girl as he was born on his bed. So they both went to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Sa'd said, O Allah's Messenger, this is the son of my brother, and he told me to be his custodian. Then Abd bin Zam'a said, but he is my brother and the son of the slave girl of my father born on his bed. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, this child is for you, O Abd bin Zam'a, as the child is for the owner of the bed and the adulterer receives the stones. He then ordered his wife, Sauda bint Zam'a, to veil herself from that boy as he noticed the boy's resemblance to Utbah. Since then, the boy never saw Sauda till he died. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, the boy is for the owner of the bed. Chapter on Al-Wala is for the manumitter. Regarding the inheritance of al-Lakit, a small child or an insane person who has nobody to be responsible for him. And Omar said, al-Lakit is a free person and not a slave. Footnote, al-Wala is a right to inherit the property of a freed slave to the person who has freed him. A hadith has made it clear that wala is a part like a lineage, it cannot be sold or gifted, so selling it or offering it as a gift is prohibited. Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her. I bought Barira, a female slave. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said to me, buy her as al-Wala is for the manumitter. Once she was given a sheep in charity. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, the sheep is sadaqah, a thing given in charity, for her, Barira, and a gift for us. Al-Hakam said, Barira's husband was a free man. Ibn Abbas said, when I saw him, he was a slave. Narrated Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, the wala is for the manumitter of the slave. Chapter on the heir of the Sa'iba, a slave whose master frees him and tells him that nobody will be entitled to get his wala. Narrated Abdullah, may Allah be pleased with him, the Muslims did not free slaves as Sa'iba, but the people of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance used to do so. Narrated Al-Aswad, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, bought Barira in order to manumit her, but her masters stipulated that her wala after her death would be for them. Aisha said, O Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, I have bought Barira in order to manumit her, but her masters stipulated that her wala will be for them. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Manumit her, as the wala is for the one who manumits, the slave," or said, "the one who pays her price." Then Aisha bought and manumitted her. After that, Barira was given the choice by the Prophet, peace be upon him, to stay with her husband or leave him. She said, "If he gave me so much and so much money, I would not stay with him." Al-Aswad added her husband was a free man. The sub-narrator added, the series of the narrators of Al-Aswad's statement is not authentic. The statement of Ibn Abbas, that is, when I saw him he was a slave, is more authentic. Chapter on the sin of the freed slave who denies his master who has freed him. Narrated Ali, we have no book to recite except the book of Allah, the Qur'an, and this paper. Then Ali took out the paper, and behold, there was written in it legal verdicts about the retaliation for wounds, the ages of the camels to be paid as zakah or as blood money. In it was also written, Al-Madinah is a sanctuary from Air, mountain, to Thawr, mountain. So whoever innovates in it an heresy, something new in religion, or commits a crime in it or gives shelter to such an innovator will incur the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people, and none of his compulsory or optional good deeds will be accepted on the day of resurrection. And whoever a freed slave takes as his master some people other than his real masters, without the permission of his real masters, will incur the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people, and none of his compulsory or optional good deeds will be accepted on the day of resurrection. And the asylum granted by any Muslim is to be secured by all the Muslims, even if it is granted by one of the lowest social status among them. And whoever betrays a Muslim in this respect will incur the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people, and none of his compulsory or optional good deeds will be accepted on the day of resurrection. Narrated Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, forbade the selling of the wala of slaves or giving it as a present. Chapter on if someone is converted to Islam through somebody else. Al-Hasan al-Basri did not think that the latter had the right to be the heir of the converted person. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The wala is for the one who manumits the slave." And Tamim ad-Dari is said to have narrated that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The one who converts somebody to Islam is the closest of the people to the converted person, whether during his life or after his death." The scholars differ as to the genuineness of this narration. Narrated Ibn Umar that Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, mother of the believers, intended to buy a slave girl in order to manumit her. The slave girl's masters said, "We are ready to sell her to you on condition that her wala should be for us." Aisha mentioned that to Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, who said, "This condition should not prevent you from buying her, for the wala is for the one who manumits the slave." Narrated Al-Aswad, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, said, "I bought Barira and her masters stipulated that the wala would be for them." Aisha mentioned that to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he said, "Manumit her, as the wala is for the one who gives the silver, that is, pays the price for freeing the slave." Aisha added, "So I manumitted her." After that, the Prophet, peace be upon him, called her, Barira, and gave her the choice to go back to her husband or leave him. She said, "If he gave me so much and so much money, I would not stay with him." So she selected her own self, that is, refused to go back to her husband. Chapter on what a woman can inherit of the wala. Narrated Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him. When Aisha intended to buy Barira, she said to the Prophet, peace be upon him, Barira's masters stipulated that they will have the wala. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said to Aisha, "Buy her, as the wala is for the one who manumits." Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, "The wala is for the one who gives the silver, that is, pays the price and does the favor of manumission after paying the price." Chapter on the freed slave belongs to the people who have freed him, and the son of the sister of some people is one of them, belongs to those people. Narrated Anas bin Malik, may Allah be pleased with him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The freed slave belongs to the people who have freed him," or said something similar. Narrated Anas bin Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The son of the sister of some people is from them or from their own selves." Chapter on the inheritance of a captive in the hands of the enemy. Shureh used to give inheritance to the captive who was in the hands of the enemy, and used to say, "He is in more need of it than anybody else." And Umar bin Abdul Aziz said, execute the will of the captive and fulfill his order to manumit slaves and allow him to dispose of his property, and he can do with it as he wishes. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, if somebody dies among the Muslims leaving some property, the property will go to his heirs, and if he leaves a debt or dependents, we will take care of them. Chapter on neither a Muslim can be the heir of a disbeliever, nor a disbeliever can be the heir of a Muslim, and if somebody becomes a Muslim before the property of his dead disbeliever relative is divided among the heirs, he will have no share. Narrated Osama bin Zaid, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, a Muslim cannot be the heir of a disbeliever, nor can a disbeliever be the heir of a Muslim. Chapter on the inheritance of a Christian slave and a mukatab, Christian slave, and the sin of the person who denies being the father of his children. Chapter on whoever claims that somebody is his brother or his nephew. Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas and Abda bin Zama' had a dispute over a boy. Sa'd said, O Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, this boy is the son of my brother Utbah bin Abi Waqqas, who told me to be his custodian as he was his son. Please notice to whom he bears affinity. And Abda bin Zama' said, this is my brother, O Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him. He was born on my father's bed by his slave girl. Then the Prophet, peace be upon him, looked at the boy and noticed evident resemblance between him and Utbah. So he said, the boy is for you, O Abda bin Zama', for the boy is for the owner of the bed, and the stone is for the adulterer. Screen yourself before the boy, O Sauda bint Zama'. Aisha said, since then he never saw Sauda. Chapter on whoever claims to be the son of a person other than his father. Narrated Sa'd, may Allah be pleased with him, I heard the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying, whoever claims to be the son of a person other than his father, and he knows that person is not his father, then paradise will be forbidden for him. Sa'd added, I mentioned that to Abu Bakr, and he said, my ears heard that and my heart memorized it from Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, do not deny your fathers, that is, claim to be the sons of persons other than your fathers, and whoever denies his father is charged with disbelief. Chapter on if a lady claims to be the mother of a son. Narrated Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with her, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, there were 2 women, and with them were their 2 sons. A wolf came and took away the son of one of them. That lady said to her companion, the wolf has taken your son. The other said, but it has taken your son. So both of them sought the judgment of the Prophet David, peace be upon him, who judged that the boy should be given to the older lady. Then both of them went to the Prophet Solomon, peace be upon him, son of Dawood, and informed him of the case. Suleiman, peace be upon him, said, give me a knife so that I may cut the child into 2 portions and give half to each of you. The younger lady said, do not do so. May Allah bless you. He is her child. On that, Prophet Suleiman, peace be upon him, gave the child to the younger lady. Abu Hurairah added, by Allah, I have never heard the word sikin as meaning knife except on that day, for we used to call it mudya. Chapter on the kaif, one who is expert in noticing resemblance between persons belonging to the same lineage. Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, once entered upon me in a very happy mood with his features glittering with joy, and said, O Aisha, don't you see that Mujazziz, Kaif, looked just now at Zayd bin Haritha and Osama bin Zayd and said, these feet, or Osama and his father, belong to each other. See Volume 4, Hadith number 3555. Footnote, these feet, or Osama and his father, belong to each other. The Kaif learned through examining their feet that they were father and son. Narrated Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, once Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, entered upon me, and he was in a very happy mood and said, O Aisha, don't you know that Mujazziz al-Mudliji entered and saw Osama and Zayd with a velvet covering on them, and their heads were covered while their feet were uncovered? He said, these feet belong to each other.